At the end of part 3, we left the East India Company at the height of its power. It controlled vast territories and it commanded one of the largest armies on earth. India had become the most valuable possession in the British Empire. From the outside, the company looked unstoppable. But empires often look strongest just before they face their greatest challenge. And in 1857, that challenge arrived. Today, it's known by several names: the Indian Rebellion, the Great Revolt, the Sepoy Mutiny. Which name people use often depends on how they view the events themselves. For the British at the time, it was a mutiny. For many Indians, it was a struggle against foreign rule. Either way, it would change history. The spark came from new Enfield rifle cartridges. Soldiers were required to bite open the cartridges before loading them. Rumors spread that the cartridges were greased with beef and pork fat. For Hindu soldiers, cows were sacred. For Muslim soldiers, pork was forbidden. The issue caused so much outrage. But the cartridges were merely the trigger. The anger had been building for years. Many Indian rulers had lost their kingdoms through British expansion. Traditional elites had seen their influence diminished. Heavy taxation caused resentment. Many feared that British rule threatened their customs, religions, and way of life. British expansion was not achieved through war alone. Under a policy known as the Doctrine of Lapse, introduced by Governor-General Lord Dalhousie, princely states could be annexed if a ruler died without a biological male heir. Many Indian rulers saw it as a legal justification for taking their lands and undermining long-established traditions. The cartridge controversy lit a fuse that had already been laid. In May 1857, soldiers at Meerut rebelled. They marched to Delhi. Soon, large parts of northern and central India were engulfed in conflict. The rebels declared support for Bahadur Shah II, the last Mughal emperor, an elderly ruler who suddenly found himself transformed into a symbol of resistance. For a moment, it appeared that company rule might collapse altogether. Some cities fell into rebel hands. British civilians were killed. Entire regions slipped out of company control. But it is important to remember that this was not simply Indians versus the British. Many Indians remained loyal to the company and fought alongside British forces. Large numbers of Sikh soldiers, Gurkhas, and several princely states played a crucial role in helping suppress the rebellion. Just as Indians fought against the British, many also fought for them. That reality makes the conflict far more complicated than it is often portrayed. The most infamous incident occurred at Kanpur, now Kanpur. Following a siege, British women and children were massacred. News of the killing spread rapidly through Britain. The reaction was fury. What followed was brutal. British forces fought their way back across northern India. Cities were retaken. Rebel strongholds were destroyed. Thousands were executed. Many rebels were killed in battle or afterwards. Both sides committed acts that remain deeply controversial to this day. The scale of the conflict was enormous. What began as a military uprising evolved into a wider rebellion across much of northern India. Historians continue to debate the exact figures, but hundreds of thousands are believed to have died during the conflict and its aftermath. By 1858, the rebellion had been crushed. Yet for Britain, the rebellion was a shock. The East India Company had spent decades expanding its territory, building armies, and accumulating power. But 1857 exposed a hard truth. A private company had become responsible for governing millions of people across a vast and diverse subcontinent. When that system came under pressure, it nearly collapsed. But although the British had won, the East India Company had lost. The British government no longer trusted a private company to govern hundreds of millions of people. The company that had arrived in India as a trading venture more than 250 years earlier was abolished. Its territories were transferred directly to the British Crown. The British Raj had begun. India would now be governed directly by London rather than through a private company. Nearly 2 decades later, in 1876, Queen Victoria would formally take the title Empress of India, a symbol of just how central India had become to the British Empire. One of the most significant responses came from Queen Victoria herself. In 1858, she issued a proclamation promising greater respect for India's religions, customs, and princely states. The message was clear. Britain had learned that attempts to reshape India too aggressively could carry serious consequences. After the rebellion, Britain increasingly ruled through alliances with India's princes and local elites. The lesson of 1857 was clear. Governing a vast and diverse country required cooperation as well as control. The rebellion also marked the final end of the Mughal Empire. Bahadur Shah II was captured, tried, and exiled to Burma. The dynasty that had once ruled much of the Indian subcontinent was finished. An empire that had dominated India for centuries disappeared into history. The British would now govern India directly for almost 90 years. But while the rebellion had been defeated, something important had changed. The idea that British rule could be challenged had taken root. The rebellion failed, yet it planted seeds that would eventually grow into something far more powerful. Indian nationalism. And in time, that movement would challenge the British Empire in ways the East India Company could never have imagined. Because the empire survived 1857, the East India Company did not. The British Crown now ruled India directly. On paper, British power had never looked stronger, yet the rebellion had revealed something that could never again be unseen. Empire was not permanent. And once the idea of resistance had taken root, it would not disappear. Not in India, not elsewhere. The age of the British Raj had begun. But so too had the long journey toward the end of empire. And that's where our story goes next in part 5. Stay tuned.